You'll see each student recite her chosen second poem in this round. And our first student in round 2 stated she remembers in 3rd grade during Black History Month, she did a presentation on Langston Hughes and his poem, I Too Am America. She said, "That will always stick with me. It taught me that despite my differences, I have a right to reside in a particular area just like everybody else. The best benefit of poetry out loud is connecting with poems that are not your own, to be able to capture beauty in other people's writing and channeling my inner voice." And I'll tell you, speaking of I Too Am America, you know how videos make their way around Facebook and various social media and become viral for a week? If you have not seen that sweet little 3-year-old girl reciting by memory, I Too Am America, you have to Google it first thing when you leave here today, because it's the most magic power of words moment you'll experience, well, after today, that is, you know. This will be the most magic, and then that'll be second most magic. But we're ready for our first competitor within the second round. With her second poem, Central's regional champ, Shakira Cross.
The Ocean by Nathaniel Hawthorne. The ocean has its silent caves, deep, quiet, and alone. Though there be fury on the waves beneath them, there is none. The awful spirits of the deep hold their communion there. And there are those for whom we weep, the young, the bright, the fair. Calmly the wearied seamen rest beneath their own blue sea. The ocean's solitudes are blessed, for there is purity. The earth has guilt. The earth has care. Unquiet are its graves, but peaceful sleep is ever there beneath the dark blue waves. Thank you.
Lauren mentioned the goals that Poetry Out Loud has to help students master public speaking skills, gain self-confidence, and learn about their literary heritage. And I'm sure you're impressed with the memorization abilities of these students as well. That alone is impressive, but the presentational confidence that this builds requires note as well. Our next student stated, "It's really helped me strengthen my stage presence. Before Poetry Out Loud, I didn't feel confident in front of an audience, but now I feel I'm able to share more of myself through reciting poetry without fear." The Kansas City regional champion is back with her second poem. This is Tempest Malone.
Idea 61, Since There's No Help, Come Let Us Kiss and Part, by Michael Drayton. Since there's no help, come let us kiss and part. Nay, I have done, you get no more of me. And I am glad, yea, glad with all my heart, that thus so cleanly I myself can free. Shake hands forever, cancel all our vows, and when we meet at any time again, be it not seen in either of our brows that we one jot of former love retain. Now, at the last gasp of love's latest breath, when his pulse failing, passion speechless lies, when faith is kneeling by his bed of death, and innocence is closing up his eyes. Now, if thou wouldest, when all have given him over from death to life, thou mightest him yet recover.
Our next performer says, I believe the best benefit in participating in Poetry Out Loud is getting to hear all different types of poetry and how people interpret them. I think that's a benefit that many of us realize as a result of this project. If you haven't looked around at the Poetry Out Loud website, you should. You can search by poet, by title, by keyword, by 20th century or older. You can do all kinds of different searches and discover poetry that maybe you remember and didn't remember that you did, or brand new poems that you haven't ever heard before. This is now time for the Northeast champion with her second poem, Kaya Thompson.
American Smooth by Rita Dove. We were dancing. It must have been a foxtrot or a waltz, something romantic but requiring restraint, rise and fall, precise execution as we moved into the next song without stopping. Two chests heaving above a 7-league stride, such perfect agony. One learns to smile through ecstatic mimicry, being the sine qua non of American Smooth. And because I was distracted by the effort of keeping my frame, the leftward lean had turned just enough to gaze out past your ear, and always smiling, smiling. I didn't notice how still you'd become, until we had done it for 2 measures, 4, achieved flight, that swift and serene magnificence, before the earth remembered who we were and brought us down. Thank you.
Although the scholarship money and the free trip are certainly great, this contest is successful in even more meaningful ways. It's nicely summed up by a state champion at the national finals in a recent year who said, honestly, what I loved so much about Poetry Out Loud and still cherish is the connection it brought me to the arts and those who value it as I do. I earned this chance to meet students who had come together for the appreciation of poetry, and I realize now the arts are perhaps the most noble and wonderful universal influence that humanity shares. Now, with the second poem from our Northwest Regional Champion, Aaliyah Smith.
Discrimination by Kenneth Rexroth. I don't mind the human race. I've got pretty used to them in these past 25 years. I don't mind if they sit next to me on streetcars or eat in the same restaurants, if it's not at the same table. However, I don't approve of a woman I respect dancing with one of them. I've tried asking them to my home, without success. I shouldn't care to see my own sister marry one, even if she loved him. Think of the children. Their art is interesting, but certainly barbarous. I'm sure, if given a chance, they'd kill us all in our beds. And you must admit, they smell.
Sarah Koo, who represented the state of Missouri 2 years ago in Washington, D.C., had this to say about this project. This is a change to dwell in the unique, beautiful identities and backstories. Implement them into your poems, telling your stories through the elaborate words of poets and telling theirs. The poet set that I used addressed the subjects of self-evaluation, the impact of man in society and racism, and I still take care to focus on these subjects in this day as I go about my life. I found out quickly that as soon as I bared my soul, then the audience and the judges were willing to bear their own. This is what I believe was my true purpose in studying poetry. It's now time for Southeast's champion, Bryce Jansen.
Wife's Disaster Manual by Deborah Paredes. When the forsaken city starts to burn, after the men and children have fled, stand still, silent as prey, and slowly turn back. Behold the curse. Stay and mourn the collapsing doorways, the unbroken bread in the forsaken city starting to burn. Don't flinch. Don't join in. Resist the righteous scurry and instead stand still, silent as prey. Slowly turn your thoughts away from escape. The iron gates unlatch, the responsibilities shed. When the forsaken city starts to burn, surrender to your calling. Show concern for those who remain. Come to a dead standstill. Silent as prey, slowly turn into something essential. Learn the names of the fallen. Refuse to run ahead when the forsaken city starts to burn. Stand still and silent. Pray. Return.
In partnership with state arts agencies, this project challenges the perception that poetry is a marginal art form, making it directly relevant to the American experience. Helping poetry regain a central presence in our culture and classrooms, and helping poets gain recognition for their work from a wide readership are among the specific aims. Seeing how these poems resonate with these young people, I think we're the fortunate beneficiaries of that effort, and I hope their high schools have been as well. It's now time for the second poem from Southwest's champion, Mary Ellen Witt.
Mingus at the Showplace by William Matthews. I was miserable, of course, for I was 17, and so I swung into action and wrote a poem, and it was miserable, for that was how I thought poetry worked. You digested experience and shat literature. It was 1960 at the Showplace, long since defunct, on West 4th Street, and I sat at the bar casting beer money from a thin reel of ones. The kid in the city, big ears like a puppy, and I knew Mingus was a genius. I knew 2 other things, but they were wrong, as it happened, so I made him look at the poem. There's a lot of that going around, he said, and sweet baby Jesus, he was right. He laughed amiably. He didn't look as though he thought bad poems were dangerous, the way some poets do. If they were baseball executives, they'd plot to destroy sandlots everywhere so that the game could be saved from children. Of course, later that night, he fired his pianist in mid-number and flurried him from the stand. We've suffered a diminuendo in personnel, he explained, and the band played on.
A benefit of participating in Poetry Out Loud is having the opportunity to make a connection with the written word, because when you find a perfect poem, you find a little bit of yourself. Those are words from our next competitor. She also confessed her approach to memorization, stating, "I think about the poem for about 2 weeks after I pick it, and I procrastinate learning it until my fear of failure motivates me to memorize the piece before the competition. I finished this script yesterday, so I understand how fear of doom can be a great motivator. Our next student is St. Charles's champion, Maggie Peranto.
The Children's Hour by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Between the dark and the daylight, when the night is beginning to lower, comes a pause in the day's occupations that is known as the Children's Hour. I hear in the chamber above me the patter of little feet, the sound of a door that is opened, and voices soft and sweet. From my study I see in the lamplight, descending the broad hall stair, grave Alice and laughing Allegra, and Edith with golden hair. A whisper, then a silence. Yet I know by their merry eyes they are plotting and planning together to take me by surprise. A sudden rush from the stairway, a sudden raid from the hall. By 3 doors left unguarded, they enter my castle wall. They climb up into my turret, or the arms in back of my chair. If I try to escape, they surround me. They seem to be everywhere. They almost devour me with kisses, their arms about me entwined, till I think of the Bishop of Bingen and his mouse tower on the Rhine. Do you think, O blue-eyed banditti, because you have scaled the wall, such an old mustache as I am is not a match for you all? I have you fast in my fortress, and will not let you depart, but put you down into the dungeon in the round tower of my heart. And there I will keep you forever, yes, forever and a day, till the walls shall crumble to ruin and molder in dust away.
We find when students participate in this activity, it gets in their blood. Former competitors speak of gaining new confidence to pursue written or spoken word performance after high school as a result of this competition. Students in the contest are often repeat competitors while still in high school as well. In fact, we often see repeat competitors at this contest, sibling competitors, or competitors from returning schools. Each year, we're in good company. With the second selection of her contest, St. Louis City's champion, Nyla Long.
Thou Art My Lute by Paul Laurence Dunbar. Thou art my lute, by thee I sing. My being is attuned to thee. Thou settest all my words a wing and meltest me to melody. Thou art my life, by thee I live. From thee proceed the joys I know, sweetheart. Thy hand has power to give the mead of love, the cup of woe. Thou art my love, by thee I lead my soul the paths of light along. From vale to vale, from mead to mead, and home it in the hills of song. My song, my soul, my life, my all. Why need I pray or make my plea, since my petition cannot fall, for I am already one with thee.
This activity certainly appeals to students who are already involved in the arts or love literature, but it also has reach to students with interests beyond the humanities. Our next student is an example of that well-roundedness. She reported, "I'm interested in studying acting and physics in college, though I'm undecided on a university right now." She is involved in theater Feminist Club. She enjoys reading, tap dancing, and playing the ukulele. Here is St. Louis County's champion with her second poem, Antruca.
The Bad Old Days by Kenneth Rexroth. The summer of 1918, I read The Jungle and The Research Magnificent. That fall, my father died and my aunt took me to Chicago to live. The first thing I did was to take a streetcar to the stockyards. In the winter afternoon, gritty and fetid, I walked through the filthy snow, through the squalid streets, looking shyly into the people's faces. Those who were home in the daytime. Debauched and exhausted faces, starved and looted brains, faces like the faces in the senile and insane wards of charity hospitals. Predatory faces of little children. Then, as the soiled twilight darkened under the green gas lamps and the sputtering purple arc lamps, the faces of the men coming home from work. Some still alive with the last pulse of hope or courage, some sly and bitter, some smart and silly. Most of them already broken and empty. No life, only blinding tiredness, worse than any tired animal. The sour smells of 1,000 suppers of fried potatoes and fried cabbage bled into the street. I was giddy and sick, and out of my misery I felt rising a terrible anger, and out of the anger an absolute vow. Today the evil is clean and prosperous, but it is everywhere. You don't have to take a streetcar to find it. And it is the same evil, and the misery and the anger and the vow are the same.
This concludes our second round.